was that, as we'll see, is they couldn't just go say that they're violating the law of Moses or he's claiming to be God. They had to go in and say he's causing disturbances. These Christians are causing problems and causing a ruckus everywhere they go. That's what they started talking about, because that was more important to them than these silly religious matters. Okay, so that's very good thoughts. And Pilate then, of course, he's amazed. Jesus is not answering the questions. He's not responding in any way. And, of course, we know why. He's intending to be crucified. So the more they pile against him, the more likely it is it's going to happen. He knows it's going to happen anyway at this point. And there could be other reasons for that, but still. So Jesus still answered nothing. And in verse 2, when Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" he answered and said to him, "It is as you say." Literally, he said, "You say." But that means, basically, that's what you're saying, right? That's it. He agrees. And that in itself could have been enough for him, if Pilate wanted to lay the hammer down, because here we have insurrection. But obviously, he didn't see anything threatening about Jesus or the way he's lived. Do you suppose that Pilate has heard anything about Jesus at this point? It's very likely. He's not had a personal audience, but he's probably heard some things here and there, and it's very likely anyway that he has. We also know that there's someone else involved in this that's not mentioned here. Who's the other person that's involved with this, that Pilate was happy to hear that Jesus was from Galilee? Who did he send him to? Paul?
Herod.
Very good. All right, so Herod was involved in this too. We won't go into that detail, but that's in the book of Luke.
Well, surely Pilate had to have known, because it wasn't his wife that said, "Have you nothing to do with this righteous man," later on at a different point?
Yeah, that was in I think that was in Matthew.
So yeah, then he's definitely heard.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So now he has Jesus on his hands, and he's trying to figure out what to do with him, and he didn't really know what to do. And then in verse 6, it says, "Now at the feast he was accustomed to releasing one prisoner to them, whomever they requested. And there was one named Barabbas, who was chained with his fellow rebels. They had committed murder in the rebellion. Then the multitude, crying aloud, began to ask him to do just as he had always done for them. But Pilate answered them, saying, 'Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?'" Now, what's he attempting to do here? Obviously, he's trying to release Jesus, right? Why is he wanting to release Jesus? We already have the one answer. His wife warned him from a dream that she'd had. Why would Pilate want to be releasing him, though?
He also found no fault in him.
Yeah, there wasn't anything to charge him with.
It's like,
so
why condemn an innocent man?
Who did he address whenever he was talking to about releasing Jesus? Who was he talking to here? Yeah, that would have been the Jewish people in general, not the... You're too late. Not the rulers. So he's bypassing the rulers here, right? He's bypassing the chief priests, and he's going directly to the people, which tells me that he thinks that this is a problem with the religious leaders and not necessarily with the people, and the people may override them, and he can kind of wash his hands of this and not do anything that he shouldn't do, or that he knows he shouldn't do. For he... first question. Why did Pilate, in the thing here, why did Pilate attempt to release Jesus when the people asked for someone to be released according to the custom? We already said that he wanted to keep his hands clean, but what does the text say that Jesus, that the reason that Pilate gave for not wanting to crucify Jesus?
Well, he was mainly asking the people, what evil has he done?
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, from what he could tell, that Barabbas was the troublemaker.
Right. So all these things relate. There's actually a verse that says specifically he knew something.
Verse 10.
Verse 10.
So that he knew that there they viewed Christ?
He knew that the chief priests had handed him over because of envy. Yeah, he was smart enough to figure that out, right? So that's the reason he went directly to the people instead of worrying about them. He's trying to do a end around, I guess.
He might have been away trying to put out a fire.
Right, he trying to put out a fire. What do you mean?
Well, he knows that a big event is coming up, and so he figures if they can solve it amongst themselves, it's one less thing he has to worry about.
What big event is coming up?
Well, it's the Passover that's coming up. He knows that the community is very involved in that, and he's like, I don't need anything happening. This is something that they can observe. It can go over well. We don't have to worry about an uprising or
Yeah, there
chaos.
very well could be part of it because he knew that the Jews would want to get. This is not a time that the Jews were going to have rebellions and uprisings. This is going to be a time of peace, and he wanted to keep it that way. So it could be that too. And I was thinking, as soon as you said that, my first thought was, if the Jewish people, if the leaders are doing it because of envy, but the people actually love him, there can be a big problem with that. So he went to the people. Let's see what they think. So it's not going to be. But he didn't. I don't think they responded the way he thought that they would. Let's see here. It says in verse 11, the chief priest stirred up the crowd so that he should rather release Barabbas to them. Pilate answered and said to them, what then do you want me to do with him whom you call the king of the Jews? So they cried again, crucify him. And Pilate said to them, why? What evil has he done? But they cried out all the more, crucify him. So Pilate, wanting to gratify the crowd, released Barabbas to them, and he delivered Jesus after he had scourged him to be crucified. Okay, so we all know who they demanded to be released was Barabbas instead of Jesus. And what does this tell us, this demand? What is it? What are some things it tells us about the situation? That they would actually demand Barabbas instead of Jesus. There's pretty obvious ones. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe my voice will be loud enough you can hear me. Oh, wow.
Now you forgot what you were going to say.
Yeah, I know. I know.
What was the question? Reasons they would want him gone.
Well, clearly, I mean the high priest, okay, had put. I mean, they're the ones who stirred the people up, all right. So the people were essentially pawns in this situation,
Yeah.
right.
So it definitely tells that the ruling authority had the power to manipulate the people.
Yeah.
They did a very good job of it, actually. And especially in this situation, they had it. Because remember when Jesus came into Jerusalem, before all this started happening? Was that what you're going to talk about, Robert? Go ahead and give it to Robert. Yeah, okay. So remember when Jesus came into Jerusalem, what's the reception that he got? And people were tearing palm leaves down to put it in front of his donkey so that it wouldn't step on dirt. I mean, they thought he hung the moon, and it's amazing how quickly this changed. It's because of the leaders that were there. Okay, Robert?
So obviously, Barabbas was guilty of crimes against Rome, where Jesus was not. But I think the crime that he committed, it's not here, but in other gospel, for insurrection and murder. So the Jews obviously, the only reason I could think they asked for him was because he was trying to rise up against Rome. And that's the only reason I could figure that they would ask for a murderer and one who caused insurrection.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the fact that they asked for him. And I don't know if, I've always had it in my mind that he just picked one and said, hey, how about this one? But you're right in the sense that they would rather let this murderer go than let Jesus go. So they thought that Jesus was more guilty, or actually it didn't matter to them at this point. The crowd was stirred up. And I'm thinking it said here, Well, it says in verse 7, he was chained with his fellow rebels. So it gives you an insight of who this person was, and he had mounted an insurrection, or they had mounted an insurrection, which wasn't uncommon. And it's very surprising that Pilate would actually let this guy go. This was a bad thing. Surprising to me that he would let him go. And that maybe it could be why he chose Barabbas, because surely they wouldn't let this guy go. You know, let's let the one who hasn't done anything go, but let's not let the murderer go. But that was a misjudgment for sure. It's not stated directly. Okay, you're just clearing your throat. It's not stated directly, but why do you think Pilate ordered Jesus to be scourged? I think he was hoping it would be enough, yeah. And it doesn't say, but I used to think that was part of the regular process, but from what I've seen, it's not normal for them to scourge somebody. It's not unnatural or abnormal, but it wasn't the norm, yeah.
It was the scourging. Well, he had to be scourged in order to fulfill prophecy, right? Because I think Isaiah talks about that. Okay.
Yeah,
by
Isaiah
his
53.
stripes that we are healed. Okay. So, and essentially, it was the scourge that enabled him to die on the cross as quickly as what he did. Because ordinarily, when men were crucified, they would live on that cross for a week or more. So, to me, that's just the providence.
Right. Yeah, that's all part of what God intended to happen. Yeah, definitely. And it was not a quick death by any means. It was for Jesus relatively quick. I mean, 6 hours, but it was still relatively quick compared to, days or up to a week or so. Yeah, that was pretty brutal. And well, let's just move on here. I'm going to skip one of the questions I have down. Let's see. Verse 16. Then Pilate led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole garrison. And they clothed him with purple, they twisted a crown of thorns, and put it on his head, and began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews." I didn't actually look up how much a garrison was. Does anybody know what a garrison is? The barracks? Could be. I don't really know. I forgot to look that up. 600.
I don't know because I looked it up, but no sense.
That's a lot. I know the Praetorium was the place where Paul would end up staying later whenever he was in danger of his life. And it was kind of the ruler's household. It was the governor's house, for what I understand. But there may be parts of it that had an open court and things like this. It was some kind of an open court where the Jews actually could have come, but they didn't want to. Does anyone remember why they didn't want to come to the Praetorium? Because they didn't want to be unclean for Sabbath. For Passover. So yeah, wow, pretty ironic. So then it says that they struck him on the head, and they clothed him with purple, twisted a crown of thorns, and put it on his head in verse 17. What did the purple cloth and the crown of thorns represent?
Royalty.
Yeah. And so they're mocking him, calling him King of the Jews. And so they obviously didn't think he was a threat, especially at this point. I mean, he's arrested. He's about to die. And then they began to strike him on the head with a reed, which is related to that crown of thorns. So the crown of thorns is, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but what I've seen pictures of it, the thorns were, pretty long. And if you fashion one and slam it on someone's head, then you hit it with reeds, it's going to cause some problems. So it would have been a lot of blood loss, just from that. And then the scourging, of course, was pretty brutal. And scourging was not something that, there was a lictor who, it was his job to do this. This was his full-time job, to beat people. And they were good at it. And they would take pride in being able to take flesh off of somebody. It's pretty bad. A lot of times people would die from that. because they would just do it until they got tired. And when they finally got tired of beating on you, they'd stop. This is what Jesus put up with, and it's very, very possible, it couldn't have happened, but it's possible from the human standpoint that he could have died right there, but it couldn't have happened. He had to endure all of that, plus go to the cross, because that's where he had to die. And Jesus himself said, if I'm lifted up above the earth, then I'll draw all men to me. And that symbol, or that figure of speech that he gave there when he said that, was being lifted up on a cross. That's what he was referring to. It had to happen that way, but the scourging was part of that as well. So what was the condition of Jesus while the Roman soldiers mocked him and beat him? I don't know if we have to answer that out loud, but think about that. He had been scourged, and has now the crown of thorns, and being beaten with reeds, putting that in pretty good in. And then the purple cloth on his back. What's his back doing with that purple cloth? It's soaking it up. And it's not going to be, it's going to be even worse when they take it off. But this is what they did, and they mocked him.
He would be awake by this point. So imagine he'd almost be just like half in and out of it from just pain and probably not getting a lot of food and water. I don't think they would have fed him much.
I'm sure he was pretty foggy.
Yeah.
But he was aware. But yeah, our bodies have an amazing way to adapt to pain. Yeah, Paul?
I think that something that we are so desensitized to a lot of the violence, we don't appreciate how terrible this was. I think of the movie The Passion that came out many years ago, not authored by God, I understand, but still it very closely portrays what took place. It's a terrible, horrible experience all the way through.
Yeah, it was. And from what I know about it, I didn't actually watch that on purpose, but yeah, come over here. I'll talk about that in just a second.
Yeah, Jason, the Romans were notorious for when someone would pass out from the pain, all right, they would take salt water and throw on them, all right, and to revive them. So
they were good. It's like smelling salts.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Yeah, it's not pleasant stuff for sure. Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Let's see here. So he was not in good condition, but this is getting worse, of course. And then it says, they compelled a certain man, Simon a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus, as he was coming out of the country and passing by, to bear his cross. Verse 21. Now, John is actually the only book that says that Jesus bore his cross. The other accounts say that Simon bore his cross. Okay, so there's been some surmising about why that is. The Bible actually never says that Jesus fell down carrying his cross. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. It never says it. And actually, Catholic tradition says he fell 14 times. They know the places. Other traditions say 3 times. It never says he fell down one time. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't. I'm not saying he didn't, but I'm saying that it's amazing how, when I first heard that, it blew my mind. It's like, because everybody knows Jesus fell. That's why Simon was compelled to carry the cross, because Jesus fell down. He couldn't carry it anymore. It's very possibly the explanation, but it actually isn't known for sure if that's the explanation or not. Does it matter? I don't think it really ultimately matters, but it does illustrate something, that the Bible doesn't have to plainly say something for us to figure out. Probably the best explanation is not even given. It's not even written. So we can kind of use reasoning for that. And so we can imagine how Jesus would have carried his cross. It's very easy to imagine that he would have fallen down, and maybe he couldn't carry it. And if you think about what he'd just been through, you could see probably why. He has a lot of blood loss, and they probably got tired of throwing water on him. You know, he was probably in a lot of pain and just couldn't do it. But he did to some degree. Now, I don't know if Simon was compelled to help Jesus along the way, or if they just finally got tired of it and said, just take it? It doesn't say, but it is something that he was compelled to do. What do we know about Simon? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Jason, I guess another comment about them, they would throw the salt water on his back, so they would, which would create more pain, and it was the pain that revived the
Oh, yeah.
the victim. Okay, so
Yeah. I got that.
they knew how to be absolutely brutal. All right.
Yes. So the word crucify, the word excruciating comes from that word. So that they knew what they were doing. And they weren't the first people to, as I understand, they weren't the first people to crucify people like that, but they are the ones who perfected it. It's like the McDonald's hamburger, right? They didn't invent it, they just perfected it. That's what they used to say. Wait, it's the Chick-fil-A the chicken sandwich. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be joking at this time, but this is where we see Jesus now. He's going to the cross. What do we know from this text about Simon, the Cyrenian? Sorry? Yeah, we know who his kids were, Alexander and Rufus. We don't know a lot about Alexander because there's a few of them that are mentioned, but Rufus is actually mentioned in the book of Romans. I think he's actually listed as a fellow laborer with Paul, received some of the greetings. So this was something that probably impacted him pretty strongly, and his children also. And it just seems to be he was just happening to walk by, and they grabbed him. It says he was coming out of the country and passing by. They compelled him to bear the cross. They brought him to the place Golgotha, which is translated the place of the skull. Golgotha or Golgotha, I don't know how to say it. But either way, it's that place of the skull. And they believe they know where that is right now. I don't know if they actually do, but there's, of course, the claim. That, and, of course, you can also buy wood from the cross of Jesus, too, if you find the right person, right? So, claims. Then it says that they gave him wine mingled with myrrh to drink, but he did not take it. Okay, so why would they give him wine with myrrh? Does anyone know that? Why they would have that drink?
Well, specifically, it's sour wine. When wine goes sour, it becomes vinegar.
Yes, and what they would do was, from what I've read, they would put the myrrh in, hoping that it wouldn't turn sour. So it could be on the verge of it, but from the reading I've done, the Romans this was not an uncommon drink, but it tasted terrible. Why is it that cultures will find the absolute worst tasting thing to drink and make it their own? And I think they do it to laugh at the people that can't drink it. When I went to Russia, they had this weird tradition of taking a piece of bread, taking a glass of water and sticking a piece of bread in it and pushing it down to the bottom, letting it sit for 7 days and then drinking it. I didn't even want to touch it, but they thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, it was wonderful for them. And that's kind of this is what this is. This is not, it wouldn't have been a pleasant taste. It would have been bitter. And it would have been, but they did use it. I've gotten conflicting readings from this because some people say, well, it was because it was to help dull pain. And other people said, no, it was done because they thought if they put myrrh in it, they could drink more of it before they got drunk. So it would actually keep them from dulling the pain. I have no idea. I also know someone else said, well, probably they did it because they knew it tasted terrible and they wanted to give Jesus, they were mocking him, so they gave him something that would be even worse. And so here, you're thirsty, dying of thirst, felt like, mouth is dry. In fact, it says in Psalm 22 that his mouth was dry like potsherd, I think is what, no, he's scraping himself with potsherds. I think it said he's dry like potsherd. But anyway, and here he is thirsty and they give him the worst thing they can figure out to give him. That's what I think probably it is, but somebody had a hand up. Anybody? No, I guess not. It was over here.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. Alcohol is an anesthetic.
Yeah.
All right. It is. So, I don't know. I see it as, well, they're wanting to ease his pain, all right, but they want him to, they want it to taste bitter. So,
yeah. Yeah, and it could have been that. I don't think that the Romans were concerned with his pain, but it very well could have been.
Yeah.
It may have been that they were trying to keep him awake. But what did Jesus do? He refused it.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I mean, that fits in with the whole concept of crucifixion, all right?
Yeah.
In order to breathe, they would have to push up with their feet, okay, to get the pressure off the diaphragm in order to breathe. But that was excruciatingly painful because of the nails that were in their feet and in their arms, all right? And so you couldn't sustain that, because of the pain. And so, but whenever they drop their feet, okay, and their arms, well then now you got pressure on the diaphragm. They can't breathe, okay, and you can only do that for about 3 minutes, and you're going to be dead. So,
yeah.
I mean, the crucifixion. I mean, if you wanted to kill somebody and cause as much pain as possible, and keep them by keeping them alive as long as possible, I don't know of another form of death that can compare with crucifixion.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So he refused it, and it depends on why you think they gave it to him is maybe why he refused it. Some people say he didn't because he wanted to feel all the pain. That's a possibility. It could have been just that it tasted terrible. But whatever it was, he definitely was giving it to them, or they gave it to him, and he refused it. And in verse 24, it says, when they crucified him, they divided his garments, casting lots for them to determine what every man should take. So why would they then cast lots for the clothes, for Jesus' clothes?
To fulfill Scripture.
To fulfill Scripture, yes. I don't think they had that in mind. Sorry? There would be, okay, so it says his clothing would have been worth something. And I could imagine that even if it was tattered clothing, they could do that. But we know that there was some special piece of garment that he had, right? It was his inner garment was one piece. And some people say that was probably expensive. We don't know where he got it or anything like that. But they divided it up, which is the most, it's humiliating to look down and they're casting lots for your clothes while you're dying. They're just making fun. It's pretty brutal. Then it says that they crucified him. In verse 25, it was the third hour, when they crucified him, and they crucified him. All right. So when is the third hour?
Yeah.
9 o'clock. Yeah. And this would have been Jewish timing. So it started at 6 in the morning, and they would go that way. All right. So it says in 26, the description of his accusation was written above, the King of the Jews. With him they also crucified 2 robbers on the right and other on his left. So the scripture is fulfilled, which says he was numbered with the transgressors. Those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha, you who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." All right. Now, look at Mark chapter 15, 31 and 32, because, actually, that is what we're just in. 31 and 32 says, likewise the chief priests also mocking among themselves with the scribes said, he saved others, himself he cannot save. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, descend now from the cross that we may see and believe. Even those who were crucified with him were reviling him. Okay, so the chief priests were saying this. He saved others. He can't save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, descend now from the cross that we may see and believe. Okay, so what is what is ironic about this statement? There's a lot of ironies going on here. What can we see is ironic about what they're saying about Jesus here?
Well, they're acknowledging his power for one.
Yeah, and of course it was in a mocking way, but yeah, how much have they already seen from Jesus?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
But what was the only sign he said he would give them? the son of Jonah, which means he would die and be resurrected. So there's some of the irony too, that they were saying, if you'll come down from the cross, we'll believe. And he was on the cross to prove. That's what he was doing, is proving himself. And the proof was going to be in the resurrection. When he's raised up again and he's standing among them, well, he did come down from the cross and he did save himself. It took 3 days, but he still was there. He was alive. Did they believe? No. So, I mean, I understand it was mocking, but most of them didn't believe. So there's so many ironies that go on here. He says in verse 31, he saved others, himself he cannot save. Could he save himself? Absolutely he could have. And I'm very glad that he didn't. Well, if they became Christians, they would have been glad that he didn't.
Jason, in that same dramatic irony, not that this is meant to be drama, but in that same dramatic irony, they're talking about themselves. They attempted to save others, but they ultimately will never be able to save themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point, that they couldn't save anyone either. But they said he saved other people, and I wonder what they meant by that. If they meant physically, saving them from pain and suffering, which very likely, or if they meant, I don't know if they meant spiritually. I kind of doubt that. But what did the people crucified along with Jesus do to him? That was mocking, right? Now we know that one changed kind of in the middle of it and was able to be saved, but they were mocking him. And we don't know how many people were there in that general area, but we know there were at least two, right? And one on either side of Jesus. And those are the ones that we know that were mocking him and speaking out against him. Then we have verse 33. It says, now when the 6th hour had come, which would have been noon, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. Okay? So this is noon, so it would have been, the highest point of the sun. But how do we know that this wasn't an eclipse? Huh?
3 hours.
3 hours. Yeah, eclipse won't last anywhere near that long. There's another good reason. Do you know what it is?
Mathematically, we can time an eclipse.
Do what?
That mathematically, we could time an eclipse.
Yes.
You couldn't time the eclipse?
We could time an eclipse.
We can time the eclipse.
Oh, to see when it happened. Yeah. Yeah, but there's actually one other one. Do you know when the Jewish calendar started every month? New moon. That means about the 15th of the month is what? Full moon. Can you have a full moon and a solar eclipse at the same time? It's impossible. The moon's on the other side of the world. So all these things relate to this. Some people say, well, it's just an eclipse. It just happened. And then it happened around that same time, and it's kind of gotten thrown into the mythology of it. No, this was from noon to 3. And there is actually, I needed to find it. I forgot to find it. But there is actually a report from a governor in another country at this time period that was trying to explain away the darkness. And they're trying to find some way of explaining it because they were saying it was because of Jesus. And he was trying to find a way to dispel that. Well, there's actually outside references to this that are extra biblical. Yeah.
Yeah. What this reminds me of is there's a line from one of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and Dr. Watson is saying to Holmes, he said, "Okay, Holmes, how do we determine who done it?" And Holmes says, "It's elementary, my dear Watson." He says, "First we eliminate the impossible, then whatever else is left, however improbable it may seem, that's who done it." Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this was not an eclipse. Okay?
No. But I think in my mind, that's what that governor was trying to say, was it must have been an eclipse or something. But yeah, we know a lot of reasons why it couldn't have been. And it lasted 3 hours. So what do you suppose this darkness represents? Why did it get dark?
So, and a lot of the songs, even people have taken that concept that God could look upon this, and so he turned away. So if the idea that's that gap, that distance that had to be there for him to actually die.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Yeah. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with Marie. I think God said, okay, enough is enough. And I mean, he didn't want the world seeing his son hanging up there for 3 hours.
It could
Okay.
be. Yeah. It definitely is a representation of what's happening with sin and how that God is punishing sin. We know darkness happened at other times, right? Can you think of another time when this happened? With Egypt. I don't know if it relates to this because he was actually striking against the gods of the Egyptians, against Ra, when he gave darkness on the land. But yeah, there are a lot of, I guess there are a lot of ideas we could throw out about why this happened. But it is interesting that it did happen, and it meant something for sure. So good. We'll get into that a little bit more, starting with verse 34 next week.